Sayadaw has been explaining for a few days that the physical and mental phenomena that are arising in oneself, such as touching, knowing, seeing, hearing, all of them are dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. So by now, yogis have understood what is dukkha, what is the truth of suffering. Not knowing the flaws of suffering, one becomes attached in them, one craves for good objects, and one clings onto them with craving. And also, one clings onto them with wrong view, and one develops kilesa, defilement, leading to suffering. Not knowing the truth, there will be suffering. Knowing correctly, the suffering will be stopped. In order to stop the suffering, one has to practice Satipatthana meditation. Among the suffering, bhavajati, the rebirth, is also taken as dukkha. When there is rebirth linking consciousness connecting the old life, old existence with a new one, there is rebirth linking consciousness. At the moment one conceives in the mother's womb. So the rebirth linking consciousness arises together with the mental state, the cetasika, mental state. Rebirth linking consciousness is neither wholesome nor unwholesome. It is abhyagata citta, indeterminate consciousness. At the moment of conception, there is rebirth linking consciousness which arises together with a few of mental states and also three groups of mentality. The three groups of materiality arises together with the rebirth linking consciousness and mental state. The three groups of materiality that arises together with the rebirth linking consciousness is very delicate. At the moment of conception, the mental and physical phenomena that is taking place at the very moment of conception consists of patisandhi citta, rebirth linking consciousness, and mental states, and three groups of materiality. So they are not unpleasant. They do not consist of unpleasant sensation. It is not the kind of dukkha, it is not the kind of suffering that is unpleasant sensation. But based on rebirth linking consciousness, there are suffering to be followed, and thus the moment of conception, the rebirth linking consciousness, the mental state, and the materiality are taken as dukkha. One is reborn repeatedly from one existence to another, and one is mixed with suffering of old age, disease, and death. And due to rebirth, one also encounters various kinds of suffering, such as physical suffering, mental suffering, sorrow, lamentation, and so on. The moment the rebirth linking consciousness takes place lasts only a moment, at the very moment of conception, and together with the materiality. So they themselves, the rebirth linking consciousness, the mental state, and the materiality, they are not dukkha itself, but based on the rebirth, one encounters many kinds of suffering, and thus rebirth is taken as suffering. So it is said that bhavajati, rebirth, is suffering. If one is reborn from one existence to another, there will be new existence, and there will be more sufferings of old age, disease, and death. So it is said that the rebirth is suffering. So one learns that rebirth is suffering from theory, and one learns rebirth is suffering according to the teachings of teachers. But it is difficult to discern from one's own knowledge that rebirth is suffering. It is not possible for one to be noting the rebirth linking consciousness and the materiality that arises at the very moment of conception. So it is the field of Buddha's knowledge that the ordinary beings cannot know by themselves. So based on rebirth, people are encountering suffering such as seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching without an end. Even at the moment of sleep, the physical phenomena and mental phenomena are arising, and they are also dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. It is said that dukkham praññeya, one should discern dukkha satya, truth of suffering. In order to discern the truth of suffering, one should be mindful of the objects that are arising at the present moment. If one is not mindful, one will not know suffering as suffering, but instead one take it oppositely. One takes suffering as sukha, happiness. And yesterday, Jaraji explained that when one is not mindful, the nama rupa phenomena, physical, mental phenomena that are clung onto with tatna and ditti, craving and wrong view, one becomes attached into these physical, mental phenomena, and it will be asada-nupassana, seeing them as pleasant, good, with craving. Such a person is called asada-nupassi, and the person craves onto these physical and mental phenomena at all the postures, walking, standing, sitting, lying. So if one is not mindful, there will be not knowing wrongly. If there is ignorance, not knowing wrongly, then one will crave for good things. One seeks pleasure. One craves for good things to see, to hear, to smell, to taste, to touch, to think, and so on. Craving, it is compared to the snake. It is compared to the snake going after the frog. The snake going after the frog is compared to tanha, craving, when one craves for good things. And when one gets these good things that one wants them, one will not give up, one holds on to them. It is compared to the snake biting, grabbing hold of the frog. So in this way, when getting the thing the person wanted, one will not give up, one will cling onto them. It is called kamupadana, clinging with sensual desire, and also one cling onto them with wrong view. Throughout the round of existences, people have been clinging with sensual desire, clinging with wrong view. The Burmese also have the wrong view of atta, soul. By practicing Satipatthana meditation, when one develops insight, when one develops knowledge, discerning mind and matter, one momentarily removes the wrong view of atta. Without developing the knowledge discerning into mind and matter, one cannot remove the wrong view of atta. Only by developing knowledge into discerning mind and matter, one can develop further into Vipassana jnana, insight knowledge, and finally, by realizing Ariya Magga, path knowledge, one can totally remove Sakkaya Ditthi. One can totally remove Sakkaya Ditthi when one becomes a Sotapanna by attaining the first path knowledge. And today, Saraji will explain, combining with practice, how one can remove the wrong view by developing knowledge. If one does not see flaws, one will be attached, there will be craving. When one sees flaws, one will no longer crave. There will be adinava, one sees them as disgusting, foul, danger. When seeing things as disgusting, foul and danger, one will no longer crave. One will no longer crave to see good things, to hear, to smell, to taste, to touch, to know good things. If there is no craving, there will not be clinging. In order to see things, in order to see them, in order to see flaws and faults in things, one should be mindful of the objects that are dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. One should be mindful in the way of Satipatthana practice. There are 4 fields of objects to be noted: Kaya, Vedana, Citta, and Dhamma. Kaya-nupassana consists of contemplation on physical aggregates, the materiality such as hardness, softness, moisture, heat, warmth, cold, stiffness, tension, movement. And Vedana-nupassana is the contemplation of sensation and feelings. Physical sensation, mental sensation, pleasant, unpleasant sensations should be noted. Citta-nupassana, the contemplation of one's consciousness such as raga, the lust-related consciousness, dosa, anger-related consciousness, moha, delusion-related consciousness, the mind, the consciousness that is free from raga, free from dosa, free from moha, indolent mind, and in brief, pure mind, impure mind, wholesome mind, unwholesome mind. Such have to be noted as citta nupassana. The general activities such as seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching should also be noted as way of Dhamma nupassana. So these 4 fields of objects are to be noted, and in brief, one should be noting the presently arising object that is arising at the very moment. At times, bodily action may be obvious. At times, feelings, sensation may be obvious. At times, the consciousness may be obvious. At times, the general activities such as seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching may be obvious. So one should be noting the object that is presently obvious, that is presently arising. Whatever objects that are arising at the sixth sense door, as seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, bending, stretching, turning, should be observed with mindfulness. Whatever objects that are arising at the sixth sense door, they are dukkha satya, truth of suffering. They are to be noted. They are to be observed at the moment of arising by satipatthana. Among the 4 fields of object to be noted, one should know the object that is obvious, that is presently arising, and by being mindful of them, one develops knowledge. Such kind of knowledge, gaining through mindfulness, will not be theoretical knowledge. It is not like the knowledge gained by learning from teachers or from books, but one gains true knowledge by discerning through the practice of mindfulness. The nama rupa, the mentality and materiality, are arising in pair. At the moment of sitting, at the moment of standing, it involves nama rupa, mind and matter. When one sits down from standing position, there is a series of intention to sit, and the actual sitting where the body becomes heavier and heavier. The series of intention to sit is nama, mentality. It is dukkha satya, truth of suffering. The body sitting heavier and heavier, stiff and tense. It is rupa, materiality, which is also dukkha satya, truth of suffering. By being mindful, one can discern the mentality and materiality that are arising at the moment of sitting. It is said, dukkham pariññeya, one should discern suffering through the practice of mindfulness. So at the moment of sitting down, one should note it immediately as soon as sitting takes place. And in order to do so, one should aim one's noting mind towards the sitting. So even if the object is arising fast, one should note the object with ardent effort ready, alert, one should note it with ardent effort. When one notes the object with aim and effort, the noting will be effective. The noting mind will stick onto the object. Mindfulness develops. When mindfulness develops, the noting mind falls calm and collected on the object. When noting sitting, at times, the noting mind falls on the intention to sit, and at times, the noting mind falls on the actual sitting, becoming heavier, stiff and tense. So by being mindful, one discerns dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. If one is not mindful, one will not know, one cannot discern. By lack of mindfulness, kilesa defilement will enter the mind. Not being mindful, there will be not knowing, knowing wrongly. In this way, moha, delusion arises. It is also called avidya, ignorance. Avidya, ignorance, being dim, vague on the true nature. If one does not know, there will be not knowing, knowing wrongly. Knowing wrongly, the person takes it is the body which is sitting. Not being mindful, one does not discern mind and matter, and thus one knows wrongly, such as it is I who is sitting, I am sitting, he is sitting, and so on. In this way, when one lacks mindfulness, kilesa defilement arise. And not being mindful, one even enjoys or one becomes attached with sitting, and one will think it is pleasant to sit, it is comfortable to sit. So in this way, one becomes attached, one craves on sitting. Even if one does not crave, not being mindful, his or her mind will be running elsewhere, or he, she may be thinking about other things. They may be wanting to see good things, wanting to hear, and so on. And there can be thoughts, imagination. Based on the thoughts and imagination, there can also be craving. And also one can cling onto with wrong view. As much the object is pleasant, the more pleasant the object is, the stronger the craving can be. So when the object is pleasant, one can have craving, clinging, without wanting to let go of it. So Sayadaw says it is like super glue. When one applies super glue on a surface, it sticks to other objects and it cannot be taken apart. So if accidentally one has super glue on one's hand, and if some other object sticks to the finger, it cannot be taken apart, and even the skin will peel if one tries to take it apart. So this example of super glue is compared to the sensual objects that are desirable. The sensual objects attract the person's mind just like a super glue sticks two things together. So when the desirable objects attract the person's mind, the person becomes attached on them, the person craves them, such that one can only be satisfied by getting these objects, and thus the person performs things, the person acts in body, speech and mind in order to get these objects. So if the person try unlawfully, if the person do action unlawfully to get these things, then one ends up committing wrongdoing, one ends up doing unwholesome deeds, and one will suffer from bad results, bad consequences due to one's wrongdoings. Not being mindful, the defilements enter the mind. Being mindful, the mind is pure away from defilements. When being mindful, one discerns mind and matter, and thus the defilements cannot arise, and the mind will be pure and clean. When the mind is pure and clean, by being mindful, there is no attraction of the sensual objects that are compared to superglue. At the moment of sitting, one should observe in order to discern nama and rupa, mentality and materiality, which are dukkha satya, truth of suffering. In noting the object, one should aim one's noting mind towards the object. Without aiming the noting mind, the mind can slip away from the object. When the mind slips away from the object, the mind can end up in sensual object. The mind can be turned onto sensual objects, wanting to see good things, wanting to hear good sounds, and so on. So based on the objects that the person is thinking of, there can be wrongful thoughts. There can be greed, craving. And when one thinks about undesirable objects, there can be dissatisfaction, anger, wanting to kill others, wanting to destroy others, wanting to torment others. In this way, when the noting mind is not aimed onto the object, there can be wrongful thoughts with sensual desire, ill will, and cruelty. When the mind is aimed towards the object, the noting mind will be face to face, direct with the object. There can no longer be micca vitakka, wrongful thoughts, and instead, when the mind is aimed onto the object, there will be samma vitakka, rightful thoughts. In order to note the object, one should aim the noting mind towards the object, and one should assert effort. Asserting effort in the practice, laziness has no chance to arise. In the presence of effort, laziness will not arise. The mind will be fresh, alert, and active. In this way, having effort, one gains victory on kausaja, laziness. When vitakka, the right application, is present, the mind is fresh, active, alert, blossom, open, with vitakka, and the mind will be free from the disturbance of laziness. Having viriya, effort present, this effort repels laziness. So in this way, asserting aim and effort in noting the object, the noting mind hits the target, the object of meditation, and thus one is certain of the object, and thus there will not be uncertainty or doubt. When the noting mind sticks onto the object, sati, mindfulness develops. When sati develops, mindfulness protects the mind so that defilements cannot enter. With the presence of sati, mindfulness, the mind is safe and secure away from the defilements. Having sati, mindfulness, the mind will also fall calm and collected on the object. Samadhi develops. The mind will not be agitated by lobha, dosa. Instead, the mind will not be distracted. The mind will be unified, collected, one-pointed, and thus there will not be uddaca, restlessness. The mind will not run elsewhere. There will not be distraction. The mind will not scatter, but instead the mind will be unified. When the noting mind falls calm and collected on the object, at times the noting mind falls on the series of intention to sit, which is mentality, nama, it is dukkha satya, truth of suffering. At times, the noting mind falls on materiality, experiencing heaviness, stiffness, tension in sitting, knowing the materiality, rupa, which is dukkha satya, truth of suffering. Being mindful, discerning mind and matter, the not knowing, knowing wrongly, has no chance to arise. Discerning, one removes not knowing. Not knowing will be removed. By noting the object effectively with all the mental strength present in the noting, one will no longer crave onto the object. There will be no craving. Being mindful of the object with full mental strength, the pleasant objects cannot attract the mind. If there is lack of mindfulness, one may be craving for good objects, and also the pleasant objects are attracting. So when these two meet, the person and the pleasant objects will stick to each other just like being glued with super glue, so that the person cannot let go of it. If one is not being mindful, if one does not have the necessary mental strength, then one cannot repel the relative defilement. When there is lack of mindfulness, samadhi concentration will not develop. The noting mind slips away from the object. There is distraction, and the person will not discern dukkha satya, the truth of suffering. Not knowing, one clings. Knowing, one removes clinging. When it is said that the craving or the clinging is removed, it means the craving becomes less and less, weaker and weaker. By developing knowledge, the defilements get weaker and weaker, less and less, and finally they will be totally removed. So one should note the presently arising object with aim and effort. Asserting effort, laziness will be removed. Laziness will become weaker and weaker and will be removed. Having sati, mindfulness, the defilements cannot enter the mind. The noting mind falls calm and collected on the object. There will be samadhi, concentration. The mind will be unified, collected, and thus uddhacca, restlessness cannot arise. Kokocha, worry cannot arise. And discerning through the mindfulness, one also weakens not knowing and knowing wrongly. One can remove ignorance, one can remove delusion. So there is the motto that the Sayadaw, the third chief Sayadaw of Truyền sect, wrote about 100 years ago. The Sayadaw's name is Sayadaw. Sayadaw wrote the motto that not knowing one clings, knowing one no longer clings. So by now, the yogis have understood how one clings, how one craves and clings, and how one no longer craves and clings. By craving, clinging, the result is there will be danger. And by removing craving, clinging, one gets good result of being peaceful, harmless. Craving, clinging, there is a danger. Craving, clinging is frightening. It is not something that one should like. When one removes craving, clinging, one is free from danger, and thus there will be peace. So peacefulness is the result of removing craving and clinging. And Sayadaw will continue to explain tomorrow. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.